So for this webinar, we asked you to prepare a case. It was the week 5 retired exam case. It was a fitness case. So we're going to go over the case outline and a few tips with the assumption that you have looked at the case and you have made an effort to attempt the case as we recommended. Outside of that, if you have not done that, the general tips will help you with most of the core 2 cases that you're going to see. So here are our top 5 tips. We could give you 50 tips, but we're going to give you the top 5 tips for outlining core 2 cases. And what I'm going to do here, just so you know, I'm going to go through each one and connect it to the case. So I'm going to flip back and forth between the PowerPoint and kind of the case and the outline to give you an anchor for this. So the number 1 tip is you really want to determine how many QQCs there are and how many QCs. So of course, we're talking about quant, qual, conclusion, and just your quant and your conclusion. And of course, that conclusion can mean recommendation. It just depends on the style of case you're doing. So when we think about the case that we were faced with the one that we looked at for the webinar, it's a bit of a unique case. It's a challenging case in a way because we have several of QCs and QQCs, but essentially we're asked for one major thing. We are asked in general whether we should remove the weight training room and replace it with recreational fitness. And specifically, we're asked in the case, is this a good idea? So when you are asked in core 2 super broadly, is it a good idea? You always default to QQC. It is just in general, it's super broad. Of course, we're going to say quantitatively do this, qualitatively do this, and here's my overall recommendation. CPA, whenever they ask you broadly, they're looking for all of that. You have several more triggers as well. Before making any changes, here's kind of what I want you to do. Is it worthwhile given the 5-year time frame? So you have lots of things directing you towards a holistic analysis of this big overall decision for your client. So underneath that, though, the general question of is this a good idea, you have several other things as well. So you have how many new recreational fitness members would we have to attract? So this is clearly a quant. You're going to answer it as in this is how many. And then you have what comes later. Oops, sorry. You have also the cost of the renovation, which is kind of a vague required in terms of required number 3. And I kind of, when I was outlining, it was like, is this a required? And once you get to appendix number 3, you can clearly see they're giving you net present value information, which is going to be another clear quant with a conclusion, because there's nothing really qualitative coming up for you here. So before you even start, you really want to understand how many quants you need, how many quals you need, and how many conclusions or recommendations you need as well. So you would identify all the required, note them on your outline, and then what I would do is step back and think, what are they asking of me here? They're asking me for a very general decision about the weight training and replacing it with recreational fitness. I'm going to support that with 3 quants, a profit, a break even, and an NPV, and of course, a giant qualitative analysis that's going to encompass everything. So I've got 1 QQC, 2 QCs, and a very large overall recommendation. All right, some of the cases that you'll see, you'll have 2 QQCs and they're very separated. But in this one, it's important to step back and notice that they're asking you for a very integrated case with 3 different quants that tend to integrate into one big qual. Okay, so for every case, identify how many QCs, how many QQCs, because the real risk point here is that you get NA on one of the qualitatives. And I think that's a risk of any core 2 case, is that all of a sudden you miss a qualitative that they're asking for. So unless it's very specific, what's the number of members or do the NPV, we want to default to including a qualitative analysis. All right, so that's tip number 1. Tip number 2 is what's your unit? So anytime you are thinking, okay, I've identified 3 quants on this case, 2 of the units are incredibly obvious. You're asking me for a profit analysis and you're asking me for an NPV. Those are not tricky with respect to units, but in the other one, you're asking me for a break even. So are you asking me for break even number of days I need to be open? Are you asking me for break even number of equipment I need to buy. What are you asking me for? No, they were really clear on break-even number of members. So anytime in a case they're asking you for a unit, you're looking for triggers. Well, okay, you're giving me number of members here. I have something to anchor on. So the unit in a Core 2 case is incredibly critical to giving your user important information. So we're always, number one, reading the required clearly as to what they're asking of us, and they're asking you clearly how many new recreational members. So there's my unit. And then I'm saying, well, how do I know how many members is reasonable? There's information in the case given to me. You'll see this as more complicated in some of the projections you'll have to do, some of the maybe even payback you'll have to do where the unit is either years, days, units, what is it? I encourage you to really flesh out the basic smallest unit you can find in any case, whether that's like dollars per hour. Sometimes I find candidates in Core 2 cases do it too big and they get this giant number that they keep dividing down. That's often a trigger that you have not properly identified your unit. All right, so in this one, we've got profit. We've got a benchmark for that at 10%. We've got fitness members. We've got a benchmark for that at the numbers they assume are going to come in for members. And we've got NPV, and the number's always going to be the same for that one. We're just looking for strictly a return in that one. All right. Okay, number 3 is the quantitative tool. The tip number 3 is what tool are you going to use? This one was not hard. So it's a little bit, this one was not hard, but I know you have seen cases where identifying the right tool is more tricky. So in this one, they strictly asked you for the impact on profits over the 5 years and required number 1. So that's a profit analysis. They asked you for break even in the second one. So that's break even. The only one that was maybe a little bit more tricky was when they asked you about the renovation. So you've also summarized information about the recreational fitness industry and the cost of the renovation. That one, when you actually went to the appendix, you could see that they were giving you tons of triggers in order to trigger an NPV. So of course, things like upfront costs they were giving you the discount rate. They're talking about the tax shield. So all the things you would typically need for a net present value are starting to be given to you. So always looking for the standard triggers to identify the tool that you're going to use. So the big picture is once you have finished your planning and you have your outline prepared, you will always know the tools you're going to use. So I have profit, break even, and NPV. I'm ready to go. Often I see candidates with management accounting cases not knowing what tool they're going to use. And the other way you can really force yourself to do this is to write a very clear purpose in your Excel. So when you go in your Excel and you write your purpose, part of that is to force yourself to identify the tool and the unit that you're going to use. So purpose to calculate break even, my tool, number of members, my unit. I've got all of that in the purpose of my Excel, which is going to flow down to my conclusion. So I'm getting marks for my conclude part of the CPA way. The break even number of members is 310. I've got a nice clean conclusion that answers my unit and my quantitative tool. All right, so again, we're doing QQC, we're making sure we have our unit, and we're making sure we have our tool. When we have all of those fleshed out during our outlining process, we become much better at quants. It becomes much, much, much more clear. When we don't, and we kind of just start our quant with the hope of kind of using the case facts, we can get off track really quickly as to what is our goal, what are we really trying to tell the user. We've got to figure that out before we start our quant, and you'll find you're much, much less scattered with them. Okay, tip number 4 is what is our anchor for our qualitative analysis? Most of the time, CPA is not just going to ask you for random qualitative analysis. They are going to give you tons of case facts, clearly as triggers, but they are also a lot of the times going to give you an anchor. So in this case, and a lot of the times the cases look like this. Right away, they're giving you mission, they're giving you vision, they're giving you a list of core values, all these nice strategy and governance topics we know about, they're giving you like right off the bat. So often, what I like to do in cases is count the number of items they're giving me within my qualitative anchor. So, for example, I counted 6 factors they were giving me within my mission. I like to write them out like this. So then, when I'm looking for my qualitative points, I'm not just making them up. I'm saying, well, is the stuff personalized? Is it enjoyable? Is it pleasant? And you have a very nice place to start for your qualitative analysis. Second, when you have an anchor for your qual, you have a breadth. So a lot of the times, like Stephen mentioned, like how many qualitative factors do I need? Well, I don't know. It completely depends on the case that you're looking at. But there are tons of triggers within the case. So if you're giving me 6 mission factors, I know I can find 6 points, just for example. Or if I start reading and I find that a couple of the points are more important, like the personalized aspect or the enjoyable aspect, I'm going to try to hit those points a couple times. So your breadth of what you can provide is always in the case. You've just got to find it. And in a typical case, maybe you hit all 6 of these mission related factors. I'm trying for great coverage of that. Maybe there's 4 solid points that I'm hitting out of the 6. But CPA cases are nicely designed to give you anchors. All right, so that's where I would anchor my qualitative. Then, as I'm going through it and I've identified a QQC, I'm really making sure that I identify my qualitative factors as I read through the case and I'm noting them in the margin, or alternatively, I'm noting them on my outline. So, personally, I would do both. I would note them on my outline so I could see how many I came up with, because you need an anchor for your time management. So how do I know how much time to spend on the qual? Well, do I have 2 points or do I have 10 points? My time allocation is really going to vary depending on the breadth that I identify. So I identified a ton of breadth in here. So I've got 5, because 2 of these were cons after I kind of thought about it, 5 pros, and I've got 6 cons. So I'm going to allocate a nice chunk of time to discussing this qualitative analysis. It's really meaty. So I better not just do one of each. I'm looking at 3 or 4 of each that I'm probably going to attempt, given how many I identified in the case. And you know, everyone, this is one thing I notice candidates don't do well. In the workshops we run, I always ask candidates, like, how many did you identify when you planned? And a lot of candidates, like, I don't know. So they say, kind of, they just start writing, oh, there's a qual, there's a qual. But here's the thing, you're having to reread this paragraph, rethink about it. Okay, find another one, reread it. It's a really hard way to do a case. So if I noted them on my outline, I could go here. That was enough of a prompt, like Tom and Teresa expertise. Okay, I can write a little bit about it. If I need to find it, I'll go back to the case. But always with your quals, look for an anchor. There's a big difference in a case between someone who just lists things randomly versus someone who's addressing a key user objective or need with their qualitative points. All right, number 5 is integration. You've got to find it. For the most part, cases are going to have something. Like if you think back to Core 1, they're pretty gentle on you with integration in terms of like your FR issues are going to go somewhere. But you got to think about where they're going to go. Is it a covenant? Is it materiality? Is it evaluation? Is it a Schedule 1? Where are they going? Core 2 is the same. In this case, had a ton of integration. So when you step back at the end of planning, you're thinking, where am I going? What's the order I'm doing these in? And integration is going to drive that. In Core 1, a lot of candidates say they just address the required in the order that they are given them in the case, and that works pretty well for most cases. In Core 2, that's not always going to be the case. So if we're thinking about what information I need to do each item, I might not go profit qual, break even qual, Reno qual, like I normally would in a case. I'm probably going to go, I need my profits. Well, my profits are going to affect my break even. And then what do I use for the NPV? Well, it's going to be some sort of something from the profits that I've already done. So I better start with my profit calc. I can do my break even next, go into my renos. Maybe I end with my qual after I've done all 3 quants, which is kind of unique and really different for this case. So don't go in expecting a certain integration. Always be open, but spend a few minutes at the end of planning to identify where that integration lies. In this one, you really had to do all three quants, think about the pros and cons, and then do an overall conclusion. Okay. The other thing I wanted to talk about were a couple other things about the case. In core one, they were pretty gentle with you in terms of like how they gave you the information. And as you move towards the electives and the CFE, the layout of the information will cause your cases to be more complex. And that's very true for this particular case we chose for the demonstration. So the number one question on here is, or the first question is, how are you going to consolidate your information across appendices? That's an important thing to consider. In this case, especially, there was a ton of information consolidation. So, for example, sometimes you're used to getting an appendix that kind of stands alone. So I'm going to do my profit calculation. That's what it looks like. I'm going to address my required number one with my profits. I'm going to do it. Okay, great. So I kind of look at my income statement and I start reading here and I'm like, seems like I'm missing a lot of information. And sure enough, as you go to the next page, they start giving you a bunch of information down here that's actually going to apply to your required number one. So Stephen might have a great point of view on this as well, but my opinion is you consolidate that information while you are read, outline, and plan. This was one thing I did on more quant cases that really cut down on the number of errors. For example, they tell you about advertising on the other page. So what are you going to use to do your profit quant? This, right? Well, when I go to advertising, if I've written beside it, it's going to double in year 1 and 2, which I got from over here. That cuts down on the likelihood of me creating an error or missing an adjustment or looking at a blank page and saying, where's the advertising information again? And having to flip through to another page to find it. So there's multiple examples of that in this case. So I found if they give you an income statement, making notes beside it will severely increase the efficiency and make sure that you're not making mistakes when you are transferring this over to your quant. Secondly, sometimes consolidation of information means like doing pre-calcs. I don't know about you, but I find this helps as well. So they gave you an anchor of a 10% profit margin in this case. Calculate that right away. It's just like core one when you get a covenant. Is it violated? Do the calc while you're planning. So the current margin is less than 10. Okay, that tells me where they are at. They tell me that there's going to be four instructors at 55,000. I'm going to multiply that out while I am doing my case, just to give me an idea. However, everyone does this differently. I just found I minimized the errors when I did some of the calcs early on or noted things and consolidated things during the planning phase instead of when I was getting panicky and trying to finish a quant quickly. All right, number 2, what structure will you use for your quants? This goes to debrief. So how are you debriefing over the weeks? So are you noticing things like when they did a profit calc, they kind of used the template here? When you did break even, do you have the template, an NPV? Do you have a structure that you know how to set up? The Excel files that they give you for debrief and for the solutions are one of the uses of those is to figure out an approach to your quants. I found this extremely helpful while going through my program in like, oh, that's how you set it up. Okay, I'm going to quickly redo the quant when I debrief so that when I see this in an exam setting, I know how to approach this, right? So thinking about your structure. And lastly, how are you going to manage your time between your quants and your quals? So one thing Stephen and I really want to emphasize is that you can't pass this case. Well, I shouldn't say that so definitely. Actually, you can't with just doing quantitative analysis. You can't. So core one, the danger zone is that you spend so much time on the profit, the break even, and the reno that you don't have time for the qual and you don't have time for a recommendation. That's a poorly done case in the sense that you're only demonstrating a one-dimensional skill. I can do a quant. So it's very important to become comfortable with not doing perfect quants and making sure that you're balancing your time. So when you're thinking about your time allocations, you're allocating very big chunks of time to qual. You're not doing 2 minutes here and 20 minutes here. You're making sure that your time is allocated to your qual to show a balanced response. So we just wanted to demonstrate something for you here. I'm going to pull up the solution for this case. So this is the profit. This is required number one. What's the profit? Well, probably the easy quant. You just had an income statement, you kind of had to adjust it, right? So when we're thinking about what makes a quant good, there's a few things. Number one is you're doing the right type of quant. It's a profit projection like the user asked for. The second thing is that you're incorporating the big things that the user cares about. Well, the change in revenue is pretty important. But there's going to be a ton of other things in the quants. Look how many things you have to include in this quant. And the question is, do I have to include all of this for a competent response? We're going to go through the feedback guide, but the answer is, of course, no. And that's a lesson you should have impounded by this point in the program. I don't have to be perfect. So one thing that you can see is like, well, what if I just I forgot the depreciation on the spin equipment? Well, right now I've got 9%, 8, 11, 11, 11. If I take out the spin equipment, I'm pretty close, right? It barely changes my answer. So if I'm panicking and I don't have time for the spin equipment, that's okay. I've demonstrated depreciation in the recreational fitness and the renovation. I've thought about depreciation. I missed one of them. That's okay. But if I forget the revenue for spin, I really change my numbers. I really start to look like this is no across the board. So when we're attacking quants, we're thinking like, what's big and material? What's critical to the outcome? And once I start to get into the nitty gritty and I feel like I've got far enough, maybe it's time to move on. I forget the consulting fee. Well, it's not really going to change my answer. I already have the equipment in there. I'm okay. So try to really, as much as you can, get away from striving towards this perfection. It's the same with the NPV. You forget one little inflow or one little outflow, it's not going to be the end of the world. So we really want to make sure we're not aiming for competent, or sorry, perfect. We are aiming for competent. We're not aiming for perfect on these quants. Okay, everybody? How's it going, Stephen? Anything you want to add?
Well, I gotta say, Aaron, I'm a little bit jealous because I had some questions in my bit and you don't have any. You're doing a better job than I am.
No, I don't think so. Who
Oh,
knows? Oh,
and
wait, I see a couple.
just as I was saying that, a couple of questions
Yeah,
came
yeah.
in.
I was gonna say, here's some.
I'm going to paraphrase one of the questions here because it deals with the qualitative points and
Mm-hmm.
variation on the theme of how many is enough.
Oh, sure.
If you've identified 5 or 6 qualitative points, should you discuss all of them? Should you limit to
Sure.
3 or 4? Um, my spin on that is so much depends on the individual case.
Yeah.
I've looked at some cases, and if I'm really, really straining and searching through every line of the case, I might come up with 2 pros and maybe 3 cons.
Yeah.
Other cases, they give you so much information that I can come up with 10 pros and 15 cons at a glance.
Yeah.
It really depends on the information they give you in the case. And again, to the specific question, should you address all of them, or should you pick maybe the top 3 or 4 and really focus on those? It's a good strategy, but again, it depends on the information that they give you in the case. That may not give you enough information to really delve into 3 or 4. You may need to hit 5 or 6 at a surface level. Again, it really just comes down to the information they give you in the case.
Yeah, I totally agree. And the other thing you can consider is how much time do you have to allocate to the pro con. So if there's nothing that says if you see six, you can't do all six. It just depends on how much time you have. So if I'm giving myself 10 minutes for the qual and I want to give myself 10 minutes and I can take 10 minutes to do six, I'm going to do six. But if I get 4 or 5 done in the time, maybe that's how many I do. So it's a combination of what you see in the case and your time allocation as well. And they're going to be correlated because how many you see is going to dictate your time allocation. But I would say use the time allocation you have to address as many as you can reasonably. Yeah, I totally agree.
And just paraphrasing one of the things that Aaron pointed out about the quantitative analysis, and again, the time pressure of the exam, a lot of candidates lose time. Oh, should I put that in? Oh,
Yeah,
do I need to include that? Should I or shouldn't I?
yeah,
And while you're sitting there deciding, should I put it in? Should I not put it in? Or even just sitting there looking at the calculation, have I got everything? I don't know. Have I got your the time that you're spending on that stewing and worrying could be spent answering one more multiple choice question,
yeah,
or could be spent writing a really strong recommendation for the
yeah,
case.
yeah.
So my advice is when in doubt, pick one. Put it in, ignore it, make a call. As Aaron pointed out, some of the smaller elements aren't going to change your overall conclusion that much. The big ones, like forgetting to put the revenue in, yeah, that's a bigger impact, but those are also the ones that very few candidates are. I don't know, should I include the revenue?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah, I totally agree. And I think a lot of this interacts with your disc profile, actually. Like, I don't know about you, Stephen, but for me personally, I just did it and whatever was there, I was fine with. The only internal check I kind of had on myself was my outcome. So if I went here and had like 56%, I would have been like, uh-oh, I'm going to spend a minute and troubleshoot my quant because clearly they gave me a benchmark of 10. It's not going to be 56. Otherwise, I kind of just went with what I got. And yeah, since you don't need to be perfect, there's lots of points that you can score on without getting it down to the penny. So yeah, I like that a lot.
And since you mentioned the disc, Aaron,
Yeah,
I'm a C.
I'm not.
I'm actually, I'm the stereotype of a C. I want to get it perfect.
Yeah,
So folks, I can identify with you. I
yeah,
want to get it right. I want to get it perfect. I want to make sure I've got it absolutely. And it's a challenge for
yeah.
those of us with that personality type. It is. It's a challenge to pull ourselves away from that detail.
Yeah, and you and just everybody after working with so many candidates, I will say something that this is something that can hurt you on the exam is just getting so lost in the quant and like Steven said, not having time for multiple choice, not having time for the qual. It's just not worth it. So you almost have to really believe like what do I have to show to pass the exam? Is it a perfect quant? No, you have to really really believe that. And I know that's more challenging for certain personalities for sure.
Just one last question before you move on, Aaron.
Hmm.
It literally just popped up in the chat box
Hmm.
here. Uh, if all the different requireds, if all the different assessment opportunities have a qualitative component to them, is it best to just save them all up and have one qualitative section at the bottom of your analysis, or do you need to do quant qual, quant qual, quant qual? Uh, to my mind, it's a matter of style. What the markers are looking for is have you addressed the assessment opportunity? Is there a logical flow to your analysis? Whether you do issue recommendation or issue recommendation recommendation recommendation, that's a matter of writing style. To my mind, it's whatever works best for you, whatever is going to uh, with your writing style, whatever flows the best and gives you the answer that you're the most comfortable with.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think I want to point out too that this case is a little unique in that there's one decision. So you just want to make sure no matter how you set it up that you're showing each decision that you have to make. So like Stephen said, like the typical way you would answer like a core 2 case would be you've got your Excel, right? And then in your Word, you kind of come in there and you have like issue number 1 and you've got your your quant conclusion per exhibit 1. Here's my NPV. You've got any of your assumptions that you said, and then typically you'd go into your qual and then your overall recommendation. And then you'd go do the exact same format for issue number 2. And like Stephen said, if you wanted to do all your quals together, all your recs together, you can definitely do that. You just can't lose sight of like maybe issue number 1 is do I expand? Issue number 2 is do I add a product? Whatever it is, issue number 3 is a variance. You still want to indicate to your marker that you seek 3 clear issues. And however you do that is really up to you. I like to do it issue by issue, but I've definitely seen multiple successful approaches. Yep. And I see another one.
Sorry, I was going to type a response, but I might as well
Oh
respond to
yeah,
it
no.
here.
I
So,
actually saw one up there. What if we forgot, sorry, what if we forgot tax and NPV? That's the same. It's just one of the NPV factors, and we'll go over the feedback guide in a minute to show you that.
very good question. If my quant is incorrect,
Yeah.
but I base my qual and my conclusion, my recommendation, like it all flows.
Yeah.
And if you make a mistake in the calculation, yeah, it's going to domino through. They take that into consideration. So if
Yeah.
your conclusion flows logically
Yeah.
from your calculations, even if you've made a mistake, where you'll get into trouble is you do the calculation, it's losing money. You do the qualitative analysis, and you know what? All kinds of cons, all kinds of warning flags. I recommend that we do this.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah.
It doesn't flow, it's not logical. It just that's when you're going to get into difficulty. But if you make a mistake in your calculations, your conclusion is logical based on that, your recommendation is logical, no problem at all.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So say in this one you got um they they have like a no profit margin each year. They never meet the 10%. As long as you plowed forward and said, sorry, it doesn't meet the 10%, that's going to be consistent. Where you will lose marks would be whatever error you made in the quant, and maybe it's one thing and that's not going to affect you that much. But if it's 5 or 6 things, of course that will affect you. But exactly like Stephen said, you plow forward with the conclusion you have. Yep. And make sure it makes sense.